I've seen men confess to murders they didn't commit to save a woman. I've seen women cover for sons who were rotten to the core. But I never saw a man walk into a police station, hand over a wallet thick with cash and credit cards, and claim he found it only for the identification inside to be his own face, bearing a name that had been listed as missing, presumed dead for 3 years. The man standing before me was a ghost, but the fingerprints he left on my desk were made of grease, grime, and very warm, very living flesh. It was November 1956, Boston. The kind of nights where the rain doesn't wash the streets clean, it just makes the grime slicker. The station house was cold, smelling of wet wool, stale coffee, and the unique, sharp scent of ozone from the teletype machines clattering in the back. I was sitting at my desk, nursing a migraine and a lukewarm cup of mud that passed for Java, waiting for my shift to end. I was 52 then, not young, but not yet the old man telling you this story. I still had patience. The door creaked open, admitting a gust of wind, and a man who looked like he'd walked out of a soup kitchen line, or perhaps hadn't even made it that far. He was shivering. His coat was 3 sizes too big, a tweed thing eaten by moths. He stood there, dripping on the linoleum, clutching something in his hands like it was a holy relic. "Help you?" I asked. I didn't get up. You learn not to get up too fast in my line of work. He shuffled forward. He had the eyes of a stray dog, skittish, expecting a kick. He placed a wallet on my desk. It was black leather, alligator skin, with gold corners. Expensive. It smelled of expensive cologne, a sharp contrast to the man who put it there, who smelled of river water and cheap tobacco. "I found this," he said. His voice was a rasp, like sandpaper on concrete. "In the alley, off State Street." I picked it up. Heavy. I opened it. A thick wad of cash 20s and 50s. Crisp. But it was the driver's license that caught my eye. The photo showed a man in a suit, clean-shaven, confident. The name read Thomas J. Sterling. I looked at the man in front of me. Beneath the grime, the weak old beard, and the hollow cheeks, the bone structure was identical. The eyes were the same distinct shade of grey. The scar over the left eyebrow, barely visible in the photo, jagged and red on the man, was the same. "You found this?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Yes, officer." "What's your name?" He hesitated. He looked at the door, then back at me. "Thomas," he whispered. "Thomas Sterling. Stay with me until the end. The truth behind this case still unsettles me." I frowned. I knew the name Sterling, not personally, but from the files. Thomas Sterling was a shipyard executive, had vanished 3 years ago. His car was found abandoned near the harbor. The presumption was suicide or a mob hit. His wife had him declared legally dead 6 months ago. "You're Thomas Sterling," I repeated. "And you found your own wallet?" "No," he said, his hands shaking. That's not my wallet. But that's my name." Before I tell you what happened next, please consider subscribing. It truly helps keep these stories alive. I stood up then. The rain battered the window pane behind me, a relentless rhythm that usually helped me think. Tonight, it just felt like static. "Sit down," I said. I signaled the rookie, Miller, to bring a chair. The man sat. He wouldn't look at the wallet. He acted as if it were radioactive. "Explain it to me," I said gently. "Start from the beginning. If you're Sterling, where have you been for 3 years? And why does this wallet look brand new?" "I don't know where I've been," he said. "I mean, I've been here, on the streets. I work day labor when I can. I sleep at the mission. And before that, I don't remember much. I had an accident, a fall, woke up in a hospital in Worcester. No ID, no memory. They called me John Doe. I just drifted back here. Amnesia, I said. I didn't hide my skepticism. It's a convenient excuse for husbands running from debts or wives. I know how it sounds, he said, desperate now. But look at the date on the license. I looked. The license was issued last month. The blood in my veins turned a few degrees colder. If Thomas Sterling went missing 3 years ago, how did he get a new license 4 weeks ago? And if this man in front of me ragged, starving, confused was Sterling, who walked into the DMV to get this picture taken? Because the man in the photo wasn't ragged. He was well fed. He was wearing a suit that cost more than this drifter made in a year. You see it, don't you? The drifter asked. That's me. But it's not me. Someone is wearing my face. I looked closer at the license. The signature was precise. Thomas J. Sterling. Miller, I barked, startling the rookie. Get the file on the Sterling disappearance. And get me a fingerprint kit. The drifter didn't resist when I rolled his dirty fingers in the ink. He watched with a detached curiosity, as if those hands didn't belong to him either. While we waited for the file, I lit a cigarette. The smoke drifted up, curling around the yellow globe of the desk lamp. The station was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the corner and the distant wail of a siren. Where exactly did you find this? I asked again. Alley behind the Blue Note Jazz Club. It was just sitting on a trash can, like someone left it for me. For you. I walk that alley every night. Everyone knows I walk that alley. A chill went down my spine. Miller came back with the file. I opened it. Standard missing persons report. Wealthy man. Stress at work. Possible gambling debts. Disappeared May 12, 1953. I compared the fingerprints from 1953 taken from Sterling's office to the fresh ones on the card. They were a match. The man in front of me was Thomas Sterling. But then I looked at the credit cards in the wallet. Receipts tucked inside. One was from a steakhouse, dated yesterday. Another for a tailored suit, dated Tuesday. What would you have done in my place? Would you assume the man was lying, or that the world had gone mad, Mr. Sterling? I said slowly. According to this wallet, you had a lobster dinner at the Gilded Lily last night at 8 p.m. He held up his hands. They were calloused, the nails broken and rimmed with dirt. Do these look like hands that held a lobster fork last night? He was right. He smelled of hunger. So, I said, leaning forward, the smoke from my cigarette creating a haze between us. We have to Thomas Sterling's. One is dead or missing. One is sitting here starving. And a third one is apparently eating lobster and renewing his license. The drifter looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. He's not just using my name. Detective, he whispered. He's living my life. And I think he's done with it now. Why do you say that? Because, he pointed to the wallet. He gave it back. I left Sterling the ragged one in the holding cell. Not because he was under arrest, but because it was warm, dry, and the safest place in Boston for him right now. I gave him a sandwich and a blanket. He looked at the sandwich like it was gold bullion. I took the cruiser out into the rain. The wipers slapped a hypnotic rhythm. Slap squeak, slap squeak. The city was a blur of neon reds and blues reflecting on the wet asphalt. It's nights like that where you feel the weight of the city pressing down on you. I headed for the address in the wallet. 42 Oakhaven Lane. Beacon Hill. The house was a monstrosity of brick and ivy, looming in the dark. The windows were dark, except for one on the second floor. A soft, yellow glow. I knocked. The sound echoed, heavy and hollow. A minute later, the door opened. A woman stood there. Eleanor Sterling. I recognized her from the file photos, though she looked older now. Harder. She wore a silk robe, clutching the collar tight to her throat. Her hair was perfect, even at this hour. Mrs. Sterling? I asked. Detective Harlan, Boston PD. She didn't blink. It's late, Detective. Is this about? Has something happened? May I come in? She hesitated, then stepped back. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and silence. The kind of silence that costs money. We found a wallet, I said, watching her face. A wallet. She frowned. Whose? Your husband's. Her expression shifted. Not to relief. To caution. My husband is dead, Detective. You know that. We found his wallet. Current identification. Credit cards used yesterday. She laughed. A brittle, sharp sound. That's impossible. It's a prank. Some sick joke. I have a man at the station, I said, dropping the bomb. He claims to be your husband. His fingerprints match. She went pale, like the blood just drained into the floorboards. She reached out and steadied herself against a console table. That's not possible, she whispered. I need you to come down and identify him. No. The word came out too fast. I mean, I can't. Not tonight. I'm not well, Mrs. Sterling, I pressed. If your husband is alive, he's not alive. She snapped. The veneer of elegance cracked. Her eyes were wild. I buried an empty casket, Detective. I mourned him. I moved on. Who is using his credit cards, Mrs. Sterling? Who renewed his license? She stared at me. I don't know. But she was lying. I've interrogated 1,000 people. I know the look. It's in the tension of the jaw. The way the eyes refuse to settle. I'll come tomorrow, she said, regaining her composure. Call my lawyer. I won't say another word without him. I left the house, but I didn't leave the neighborhood. I parked the cruiser down the street, lights off. I watched. What would you have done in my place? Pressed her harder. Or waited for the mistake. 30 minutes later, the garage door opened. A black sedan pulled out. It wasn't Mrs. Sterling driving. It was a man. He wore a hat pulled low. I followed. The sedan moved fast, weaving through the late-night traffic. We headed toward the south end, the industrial district. The warehouses stood like skeletons against the skyline. He pulled into a fenced lot behind a shipping depot. Sterling Shipping. I killed my engine and rolled the car silently to the curb. The man got out. I used my binoculars. He walked under a security light. He looked up, just for a second. It was the face from the driver's license. The clean-shaven, well-fed face of Thomas Sterling. But the real Thomas Sterling was in my holding cell, sleeping on a cot. This man unlocked a side door and vanished inside. I checked my revolver. Standard issue, .38 special. I hoped I wouldn't need it. I got out of the car, the rain instantly soaking my trench coat. I moved toward the fence. There was a hole in the chain link ID used on a stakeout 2 years prior. Still there. I slipped through. The lot was full of shipping containers, rusted giants in the gloom. I reached the door. Locked. I picked it. A skill the department frowned upon but silently appreciated. Inside, the warehouse was vast and dark, smelling of diesel and sawdust. I heard footsteps on a metal gantry above. I moved into the shadows. Did you find it? A woman's voice echoed from above. Mrs. Sterling. No. A man's voice replied. Smooth. Cultured. The trash can was empty. Someone took it. If the police have it. Relax, Eleanor. If the police have it, they'll trace it to the missing husband. They'll think he's alive. But the drifter, she hissed. You said you saw him near the alley. He's a bum. Nobody listens to bums. We stick to the plan. We leave tomorrow night. I stepped on a loose bolt. Crunch. The voices stopped. "Who's there?" the man called out. I froze behind a stack of crates. "Probably a rat," the man said. But his voice was tight. "Let's finish packing the safe." I realized then. After this there was no turning back for me. I wasn't investigating a missing person anymore. I was witnessing a conspiracy in real time. I crept forward, trying to get a better angle. I needed to see who this imposter was. Why he looked exactly like Sterling. I reached a gap in the crates. I looked up at the office window overlooking the floor. The man was stuffing cash into a duffel bag. He turned. I saw his face clearly in the office light. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was surgery. I could see the faint, white lines behind the ears. The skin was too tight. The nose was perfect to perfect. This wasn't a twin. This was a mask made of flesh. And then, I felt the cold muzzle of a gun press against the back of my neck. "Drop the piece, detective," a voice growled behind me. Slowly, I raised my hands. The rain hammered on the tin roof, drowning out the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. I've been in tight spots before, but there's a special kind of dread that comes when you're disarmed in a dark warehouse by people who have already proven they don't mind erasing a human life. "Kick the gun away," the voice behind me commanded. It was rough, professional, hired muscle. I did as I was told. My .38 skittered across the concrete. "Turn round." I turned. A large man in a raincoat stood there, holding a silenced pistol. I didn't recognize him, which worried me more than if I had. Known criminals have patterns. Strangers are unpredictable. "Upstairs," he gestured. We walked up the metal stairs to the office. The fake Sterling and Eleanor were waiting. Up close, the man looked even more uncanny. He was handsome, but in a plastic way. His eyes were cold, devoid of the fear I'd seen in the drifter's eyes. "Detective Harlan," the man said. He checked my badge, which had pulled from my pocket. "You're persistent." "I try," I said. "So, who are you really?" "Because I've got the real Sterling eating a ham sandwich in my holding cell." Eleanor gasped. "You have him." "Shut up, Eleanor," the man said. He looked at me. "The real Sterling, that piece of trash, has a donor. That's all he is." "A donor?" I asked. "Identity is a fluid thing, detective," the man said, lighting a cigar. He moved with an arrogance that grated on my nerves. "I needed to disappear a few years back. Problems in New York. I found Sterling. He was depressed, drunk, wandering the docks. Suicidal. It was. Serendipitous." "So you didn't kill him?" I surmised. "No. Killing him would have ended the game. I needed his life. I bought his papers. He was happy to sell. He wanted to die, but didn't have the guts to pull the trigger. So he let me become him. I gave him enough cash to drink himself to death. But he didn't die," I said. "No. The cockroach survived. And then, 3 years later, I needed to disappear again. The New York problems. They caught up. So you decided to fake Sterling's death again." "Exactly. But I needed a body this time. A real body." The air in the room grew heavy. I looked at Eleanor. She was looking at the floor. "You were going to use the drifter," I said. "You were going to kill the real Sterling, dress him in your clothes, and leave him to be found. Then you and Eleanor take the money and run. Clean. Poetic." The man smiled. "The man returns to reclaim his life, only to be tragically murdered. Case closed. We vanish." "But he lost the wallet," I said. "Clumsy." The man spat. "I was tailing him. I had the wallet ready to plant on his corpse. I bumped into him in the alley, ready to do the job. But a patrol car turned the corner. I panicked. Dropped the wallet. He picked it up and ran. It was a comedy of errors wrapped in a tragedy. So now what? I asked. You kill a cop. That brings heat you can't run from. The hired muscle behind me shifted. Boss, he's right. Cop killing is bad for business. We don't have a choice, the fake Sterling said. He opened the drawer and pulled out a suppressor for his own gun. What would you have done in my place? Begged. Bargained. I laughed. It was a dry, hacking laugh. What's so funny? Fake Sterling asked. You think I came here alone? I lied. I called it in. Suspicious activity at the warehouse. A squad is 5 minutes out. It was a bluff. A weak one. But it made Eleanor flinch. He's lying, the man said. But he glanced at the window. That split second of doubt was all I needed. I grabbed the heavy glass ashtray from the desk and hurled it not at the man, but at the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Pop. Darkness. I dropped to the floor as a silent shot whipped through the air where my head had been. I rolled. The office was small. I knew where the door was. Get him. The man screamed. I scrambled on hands and knees. I hit the hired muscle's legs. He fell with a grunt. I didn't stop to fight. I dove out the door onto the metal walkway. Below me, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows. I ran. My footsteps clanged on the metal. Shoot him. A bullet sparked off the railing next to my hand. I reached the bottom of the stairs and ducked behind a forklift. I needed a weapon. I patted my pockets. Nothing. My gun was upstairs. Then I saw it. The fire alarm on the wall. I grabbed a wrench from a workbench and smashed the glass. The bell began to ring a deafening, mechanical shriek. Clang, clang, clang. It wouldn't stop the bullets, but it would cover my movement. And in the silence of the industrial district, it might just draw a patrol car. I moved through the maze of crates. I could hear them coming down the stairs. Forget him. Eleanor screamed over the alarm. Let's go. We have the money. No loose ends. The fake Sterling roared. I was cornered near the loading dock. No exit. The large bay doors were chained. I saw a shadow move to my left. The hired muscle. I braced myself for the end. I was too old for this. I was tired. Then, the side door the one AD picked burst open. A silhouette stood there in the rain. Hey! A voice shouted. A familiar, raspy voice. It was the drifter. The real Thomas Sterling. He held a tire iron in his shaking hand. He must have followed me. Or maybe he just knew where his nightmare lived. The distraction was enough. The hired muscle turned toward the door. I lunged. I tackled the gunman, driving my shoulder into his gut. We hit the concrete. The gun slid away. I punched him mid-jaw. Throat. Dirty fighting. The kind you learn on the beat, not in the academy. He went limp. I scrambled for his gun. I brought it up just as the fake Sterling came around the corner. His weapon raised. Drop it. I yelled. He hesitated. He looked at me. Then at the drifter standing by the door. You, he sneered at the drifter. You pathetic waste of space. You should have died in the gutter. Maybe, the drifter said, his voice surprisingly steady. But I'm taking my name back. The fake Sterling raised his gun. I fired. One shot. Center mass. He crumpled. The silence that followed, even with the fire alarm ringing, felt absolute. The police arrived 4 minutes later. The fire alarm had done its job. Miller found me sitting on a crate, smoking a cigarette ID taken from the dead man's pocket. The drifter was sitting next to me, staring at the body of the man who had worn his face. Jack, Miller said, looking at the carnage. What the hell happened? Identity theft. Miller, I said, exhaling a long plume of smoke. Aggravated. We rounded up Eleanor. She didn't fight. She just sat in the back of the squad car weeping. not for her husband, and not for her lover, but for the life of luxury that had just evaporated. In the days that followed, we pieced it all together. The dead man was Arthur Vance, a mid-level mob accountant from New Jersey who skimmed off the top. He needed an out. He found Sterling a depressed, wealthy lookalike and bought his life. Plastic surgery finished the job. For 3 years, Vance lived as Sterling. He doubled the shipping company's profits, using mob tactics. He married Eleanor, who figured it out quickly, but liked the new, ruthless husband better than the old, weak one. But Vance's old bosses found him. He needed to vanish again. He planned to kill the real Sterling who had been drifting around Boston, barely surviving, and use his body as a decoy. It was a perfect plan, ruined by a moment of panic in an alley and a wallet dropped in the rain. I sat with the real Thomas Sterling in the interrogation room one last time. He was clean-shaven now. We'd given him a suit from the lost and found. He looked almost like the man in the photo. "So," I said, "you're Thomas Sterling again." He looked at his hands. "Clean hands." "Am I?" he asked. "Legally, yes. You own the house, the company, the accounts." He laughed. A sad sound. "The company's being investigated for racketeering. The house is a crime scene. My wife is going to prison for conspiracy to commit murder. It's a mess," I admitted. "I sold my life, detective," he said softly. "I sold it for a bottle of whiskey and a bus ticket. I don't deserve it back." "Deserve has nothing to do with it," I told him. "It's yours. What you do with it now is the only thing that matters." He picked up the wallet. It was still sitting on the table, evidence tagged. "He was better at being me than I was," Sterling said. "He was a crook, Thomas. He was playing a role. You're the real thing, flaws and all." He nodded slowly. He stood up. He didn't look like a bum anymore, but he didn't look like a CEO either. He looked like a man waking up from a long, bad dream. "Thank you, Jack," he said. It was the first time he used my first name. He walked out of the station. I watched him go. He stepped out into the rain, but this time, he hailed a cab. The case of the man who returned his own wallet closed quietly. The papers ran with the sensational angle. Mob accountant steals life. Wife implicated in double cross. They loved the gore and the glamour. They didn't care much about the man who walked out of the station. Thomas Sterling sold the house. He sold the company, or what was left of it, to the government to pay off the fines. He took what little money remained, a fraction of the fortune, and moved west. I heard he opened a small bookstore in Seattle. Quiet work. Anonymous. Eleanor got 15 years. She died in prison of pneumonia in '62. As for me, that night stayed with me. I kept thinking about that moment in the alley, the randomness of it. If the fake Sterling hadn't dropped the wallet, if the real Sterling hadn't been honest enough, or perhaps confused enough, to bring it in. We walk through our lives thinking our identity is etched in stone, our name, our face, our history. But I saw how easily it can be bought, sold, and worn by someone else like a cheap suit. The scariest part wasn't the gunfight or the mobsters. It was the look on Eleanor's face when I first showed her the drifter. She didn't see a human being. She saw a loose end. She saw a prop that had walked off the stage. I retired 3 years later. The job makes you cynical, and I didn't want to lose the ability to trust my own eyes. Sometimes, late at night, when the rain is hitting the window just right, I check my own wallet. I look at the license. I look in the mirror. And I make sure I recognize the man staring back, because in this city, in the dark and the fog, you can lose yourself. And if you're not careful, someone else might find you and decide they can wear your life better than you can. And what's the strangest case you ever heard of? I'd like to read your stories in the comments.